This morning, Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, told the world she had an announcement. People were wondering, what is it? Is it a lawsuit against the Trump organization? Because I had heard that there was something about Deutsche Bank giving documents over. No one expects the dissolution of the NRA. She had an announcement. This was it. Take a listen.
We are seeking an order to dissolve the NRA in its entirety, to require Mr. LaPierre, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Powell, and Mr. Frazier to make full restitution for funds they unlawfully profited and salaries they earned while employees and pay penalties. To remove Mr. LaPierre and Mr. Frazier from the NRA's leadership, and to ensure none of the four individual defendants can ever again serve on the board of a charity in New York State.
Huge deal. You might be surprised. What is New York doing involved in this? Since 1871, the NRA has been chartered in New York. So what is in the lawsuit? According to the lawsuit, as a report states from CNBC, the senior leadership of the NRA squandered millions in donations on personal trips, private jets, and expensive meals. The failure to lawfully manage the organization's funds contributed to losses of $64 million over 3 years. James said the NRA was, quote, a breeding ground for greed, abuse, and brazen illegality. The lawsuit claims that the group had a $27.8 million surplus in 2015, which declined by about $64 million by 2018, putting the group $36 million underwater. Now, Wayne LaPierre, a longtime NRA executive and Trump ally, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on private trips for himself and his family, the suit alleges. Those trips include 8 visits to the Bahamas and all expense paid safaris in Africa with his wife, Susan, according to the lawsuit. And the trips to Bahamas, how much did those cost, you might ask? Well, the trips to the Bahamas cost $500,000. And over the past 2 years, LaPierre also spent $3.6 million on travel consultants and several million dollars on private security for himself and his family, according to the lawsuit. Private security, I feel like when you run the NRA, the guns should be free, right? So Benjamin, when you heard that this was the announcement, what was your reaction?
I was a little surprised, to be quite honest with you. I felt like it was a shock in that this is a big beast to take on, right? This is not a small thing, especially in an election year. I immediately went to the political ramifications. To take on the NRA in this fashion is to give Republicans all the red meat that they need. It's necessary, right? I think she has a legitimate case against them, but is the timing prudent? I don't know. Donald Trump came out immediately attacking her about this and stirring up fears of the Second Amendment because the NRA has become synonymous with the Second Amendment. So it remains to be seen how productive this will be in terms of the election year.
Yeah, and this might be the theme of today's show in terms of my analysis of it, is there is a difference between being right and saying something the right way, and like the strategy and what's the use, the timing. But with I had this at the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, shots fired against the NRA. But then when you think about the NRA's recent history, it has been a disaster over there. They, take a page out of Biden's book. It is imploding on itself. Why are you helping it? With coronavirus, there haven't really been the kinds of shootings at schools that end up being so beneficial to the bottom line of the NRA, because people rightly, as you say, like after school shootings, call out the NRA for essentially standing in the way of any legislation that could fix this problem in America. And not just that, but people start donating.
Yeah.
And I mean, what could potentially be? Do you think she's operating from a place of strategy, or do you think she's operating from a place of, well, I have the case now, I'm going to take it now?
Yeah, no, I think if you ask any Democratic consultant, not that we really care what they say, but in this case, if you were to ask them, they would rather she had not taken this case at this point, right? I agree with, if she has a case, she has to do what she has to do. And it's not for her to play politics, but you have to think about the broader situation, right? I think if they can bring down the NRA on justifiable causes, then it's a worthwhile cause. But this is certainly going to stir up the base. I don't know of any other issue, perhaps maybe abortion and a woman's right to choose, that would stir up the Republican base as much as this case. So I'm not attacking her or disagreeing with her decision, but just strategically, I think it's going to be a liability.
Yeah, I agree. There's another angle to it that I was reminded of. We're gonna essentially talk about it, but it mentions the former advertising firm Ackerman McQueen, which was involved in NRA TV, if I remember correctly. And either way, NRA was involved in NRA TV, which I think is the source of all of that missing money, because it was a giant disaster and folded in on itself. According to the lawsuit in 2017 and 2018, Ackerman McQueen, according to CNBC again, spent $70 million on these out-of-pocket expenditures that essentially they weren't accounting for, and quote, public relations advertising that concealed entertainment and travel spending by NRA executives, including the personal hair and makeup of Susan LaPierre. And judging by how much it probably cost to do Wayne LaPierre's hair, I am terrified at how much they must have spent on Susan.
This really just shows you like the ridiculousness, right? I think obviously the aphorism is correct. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. In this case, they had an obscene amount of money to do anything that they wanted to do with it, and a lot of political power. And so you're going to see this level of kind of petty corruption. It's not beneath them, right? It's the type of thing that you would expect them to engage in when they have as many resources as they have, as much political power as they have. They believe that they were above the law, so there was nothing too frivolous for them to corrupt.
Right, the whole thing's a lie. The whole thing's a grift. The entire NRA is not what they say it is. Yes, They are effective only in moments like this, in terms of what their dues-paying members are willing to react to. Yeah. Now, there's tons of stuff the NRA does behind the scenes that their members don't really even approve of. I know when we were in the height of, and it's so sad to say, the school shootings that only stopped when coronavirus came around. I mean, it's just really, really, really sad that the NRA can act in such obviously nefarious ways that are counter to what their own dues-paying members believe. Because in the wake of all that, the dues-paying members were saying things like, yeah, we should have common sense gun legislation. We should do all these things legislatively. But the scale has tipped so much, especially in calling it that, because of the leverage that you get fundraising-wise out of the 28% of your members who don't want any legislation whatsoever. They throw tons of money at you, and then you're able to take that money and work toward legislative goals that go completely counter to the 70% of your dues-paying members who are like, let's just make sure that people who would fail background checks don't get assault rifles.
Right. You kind of alluded to it, right? There's nothing beneficial in having reasonable politics right now, right? Everything is hyper partisan. Everything is extreme, and so for them to do something that's reasonable, which is to follow the consensus of the majority of their own members, that's not acceptable, because that's not what's going to bring in the money. So they're living in the high life. They're doing all these corrupt things, and they're doing it as a result of the way they have been able to drive this wedge issue and to keep America divided, even though their own membership disagrees with them.
Yeah, and I'm a little to the point of the red meat angle. Trump retweets Liz Wheeler, who says, imagine going after the NRA, but refusing to touch the Clinton Foundation. Clinton Foundation was trending today. Planned Parenthood was trending today, because they're like, this is like a Republican attorney general of a state going after Planned Parenthood to get it dissolved. But the most ridiculous and easy swing at a softball, not to say that this is a bad idea in itself, and I think we've made that point, but just to show Trump's reaction to it during Chopper Talk today. Let's take a look.
I just heard about that. That's a very terrible thing that just happened. I think the NRA should move to Texas and lead a very good and beautiful life.
I can't with this dude.
I lead a really good and fulfilled life, a fulfilling life. Move to Texas, away from the, Donald Trump. He never ceases to amaze me at how utterly ridiculous a simple sentence can be. Like he finds a way to make the most simple thing just idiotic and imbecilic, and yet it resonates with his members, with his supporters. He still has that same 36% of people who support him no matter what, no matter how ignorant he sounds.
Live a beautiful life. It's like an HGTV House Hunters episode. Like the NRA is a resident that's like, they're looking for a 2-bedroom, 3-bath outside San Antonio. It's like, what? How could the NRA live a beautiful life? And imagine that life when that beautiful life is advocating for legislation that results in the deaths of kids at schools.
So now if we wanted to be equally as ridiculous, we can, by extension, take the Citizens United decision and say corporations are people. So maybe he's not really being that far off, but it still is rather absurd.
Who knew that he had such like grounded constitutional bases for his ridiculous sentences?
Exactly.
Want to win a free electric scooter? Well, our partners at Aspiration and Zoom Electric are making it possible. All you have to do is head to tyt.com/greensummer for your chance to win.